Hi, welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting high performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is Robert Rigby-Hall. He's Chief People Officer of Keplr Vision and a senior executive with over 30 years of global experience, specializing in human resources. He has served as the Chief Human Resources Officer of public and private equity-held businesses in multiple industry sectors. Atypically, he has also served as the CEO of businesses in the U.S. and Asia Pacific. He's a dual U.S. British citizen who has lived and worked in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. His broad experience also includes being a trustee of Boys Town of New York, founder and chair of the Global Business Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and advisory board member of 2 global HR consulting businesses. He holds a certificate in corporate governance from Kellogg Northwestern University, a certificate in diversity and inclusion from Cornell, and a certificate in coaching from the College of Executive Coaching. He was also the recipient of the Business Leadership Award by the United Nations Global Compact for his work on anti-human trafficking. So please welcome the conversation. I'm excited to talk Still Evolving with Robert Rigby-Hall. Welcome, Robert. I'm so grateful for your time and for joining me today and having this conversation about our own journeys and still evolving, how we adapt when adversity strikes and keep trucking on through all that. So really wanted to start off the conversation, giving you some time. I would love our audience to hear more about your journey and perhaps sharing also some of your motivations that fueled it along the way. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Amy, thanks very much. It's great to be with you. So as people can probably hear from the accent, I was born in the UK. Interestingly, my father passed away when I was about 16, and I think I realized later in life that I was probably quite a lost kid. I wasn't particularly academic. My sporting prowess was very squarely average. Most of the school that I was at was a rugby playing school, and that brutality wasn't really me. And after leaving school, I think lost probably summed it up well. And I had this dream that I would go to Japan and at the age of 18 and teach English and learn Japanese. And that was going to be what would somehow make me the man I perhaps wanted to be. And I was there 6 months, had a fantastic time, but it was super challenging. But from a independence perspective, it was a real learning experience. I came back, I studied business studies and finance, again, all in the UK. I started then with a consulting firm, spent some time with them, decided that really consulting, although it was great, it was strange to do consulting without having inside experience for the company. So went in-house, and after a few years, got my first opportunity where someone walked into my office and said, "We'd love you to be in the US. We've appointed a new president. Would like you to lead HR for the business. And can you sort of be there next week?" And so that was a negotiation with my wife, who was also working, one of those dual career, dual income situations. But we moved to the US with 2 kids in tow and fell in love with the US and ended up never leaving, although I've been off and on in lots of different countries ever since, in Asia and back in Europe. I had an opportunity to then run a business in the US as the president of that business, then run another business in Asia. So I've lived and worked in the UK, the US, the Netherlands, and Singapore. And I then left corporate life probably now 10 years ago and decided to do something on my own and set up my own business in Europe. Maybe it was a brave move. Maybe it was a silly move. I don't know. But it was something that was certainly fascinating and challenging, and did it with a business partner. And then moved back to the US, moved back to corporate life, which is kind of how I got to where I am now.
Wow. Amazing. Just hearing also the international perspectives you've gained through all of those travels and all of those work and personal experiences. I would imagine it was not without kind of a punch in the gut, or at least a tap on the shoulder along the way, as that journey doesn't, it sounds amazing, first off, and also knowing the reality is none of us escape that adversity that life can bring. So I'm just curious, Robert, in your journey when challenge or setbacks or adversity has struck, what has grounded you or even helped you navigate those storms to kind of continue evolving and perhaps seeing opportunities that come out of crisis?
I think the global experience has taught me about adaptability and flexibility, being sort of dropped into another culture and even moving UK to US, which many people would think would be simple from a language perspective. There are very significant cultural differences and some not insignificant language differences as well. Then if you think about going to somewhere like Singapore to live, again, a very different set of rules culturally that guide you. And so I think that movement around the world taught a lot of resilience, persistence, and cultural adaptability that was really important to me. There are a few things that I think about. I'm a big believer in gratitudes. And so I like to journal my gratitudes most evenings if I make the time to do it. I think that's something for me which has ingrained a positive attitude. I remember one thing my father said to me was, make your own luck. And I never really understood that phrase until many, many years later, because it's a silly thing to say, because you're either lucky or you're unlucky was kind of my thought process. But I've realized that it was really an absolutely true statement, because making your own luck is about seizing opportunities when they come along, taking risks, and then delivering on those. So that first time that a CHRO walked into my office in the UK and said, "We want you in the US," I took that opportunity. I seized that opportunity, went there, made something of it, delivered on what I was asked to do. So when people say, well, you were so lucky to be given an opportunity in the US, well, maybe there's a kernel of luck associated with that, but it was really about seizing on that moment. And I think the same goes for the negative moments. I've twice CEOs leave, and I've been the casualty of those CEOs leaving, and the new CEO has come in and said, I want my own person and it's time for you to leave. And that hurts because, you've worked hard, you've tried to deliver, you've done your best, you've built relationships, and then someone sort of casts you aside. But you have to just look at that and say, okay, well, it's not a reflection on me personally or professionally. It's just time to move on and see what happens next. And every time it happens, it seems to create new and better, I also mean different opportunities. And that's what I think it's about. So that's where the resilience and that kind of grit of coming back from those down moments, those challenges comes in.
I love it. You talk about the role of flexibility, right? And at first, you could think of that as flexible, perhaps with cultural customs or communication. But really, you're also referencing the power that comes in our psychological flexibility and how much of a gift and how what a source of power that can bring when we are faced with these unexpected changes in our lives that feel like punches to the gut. You talk about the leadership change. Perhaps some of us deal with like leadership vacuums. And we know in climates such as that, with the fear of change that permeates and the stress that brings, it sometimes brings out the not so nice of us. So being able to have that flexibility, both just or adapting to what comes next, there is that optimistic vision that grounds it. But I really appreciate the psychological flexibility that you're highlighting. That really can be so empowering. I'm reminded back in, I was in grad school, and there was a Shambhala, kind of a Buddhist center in Baltimore. And I took a Buddhist psychology class, which it purely came out of curiosity. I really just wanted to better understand what would that be like. And I remember one takeaway coming from a core principle in that religion being that attachment is also, or clinging comes and brings that discomfort or the angst or the pains that we may have in life. And I was just reminded of that when you talk about being adaptable or being flexible. When you were struck with that adversity, it's easy to kind of cling to what should have been, or to your point, the work, should have claimed or should have spoken for itself. And really, so many of these things in life, they often don't have as much to do with us as just perhaps our new set of circumstances or the new path that perhaps that company was taking. So it brings a lot to mind and how powerful it can be in dealing with that shift.
I think that's also where the role of having friends, coaches, mentors comes in as well. People that you can turn to in those moments who maybe give you support, give you guidance, give you thoughts about where you might go. And that's part of the sort of lifelong learning that one needs to have, particularly, I think, in this rapidly changing and evolving world, and an ability to reflect on things and learn from those and be open to. I really don't like the people use that sort of but word a lot. I've really tried to replace but with and I've really tried to, and I think about it with people who work for me in terms of like direct reports, to try and build on things that they say versus immediately go to an oppositional position as well. So I do think there's a lot around how you get perceived in an organization, how you create positive energy in an organization, and how you build in a learning culture for yourself, and how you reflect on your strengths, your weaknesses, your development opportunities, and challenge perhaps some of the perceptions you have of you and how you're perceived by somebody, or how you perceive other people as well. And I think that all wraps together pretty tightly in learning and evolving as a human being.
Yeah, we're not doing this by ourselves, right? Like we're not in working in isolation, living in isolation. And I appreciate highlighting the role that mentors or other coaches or other colleagues, or even in your personal life, the power that can come from connection and helping us navigate perhaps the stress reaction that comes from getting, facing that adversity, but also helping us detach a little bit and work through the reaction so that we can refocus and perhaps see something more clearly, that in the throes of it, it's sometimes hard to see. I mean, I think of my closest friend, and she's also in this industry, colleague, because of the trust that I have in her in the relationship. When she has challenged me, I may not always fully love it, right? She's on
Of
point, and it
course.
comes from such a place of love. It's like, how can I not at least consider that question or reflect? Is there something I'm missing here? Because perhaps she's seeing this so much more clearly than I in this moment. So that power of connection just helps, not just with resilience, with that clarity that I think then fuels this continuing process where you can reflect and you can figure out, okay, now what's next? How do I respond? For sure.
It's as a Brit as well, we were from an early age taught to suppress feelings and be quite clinical, quite cold. I was struck in my first time in the US as an adult by a level of positivity, which I think has probably declined somewhat in the US, but there was definitely a sense of positivity. And it was false positivity, but nevertheless, it was positivity. And by false positivity, I mean, there used to be a guy I worked with who, whenever I'd see him, I'd say, hey, Chris, how are you? His response was always, oh, I'm great. I feel like $1,000,000. He could have been limping down the corridor, missing a leg kind of thing, and he would still have said the same thing. Whereas you ask a Brit how they're doing, and the typical response is, not bad. They could have won the lottery, but it would still be not bad. And so I think that's one of those cultural things. But I think where I'm going with this is this self-reflection is really interesting, and how you get things that happen to you in your childhood, how they significantly influence how you look at the world. And I have this set of memories associated with my father, who, as I said earlier, passed when I was 16, but I have a set of memories about him. My sister, alternatively, has a very different set of memories. And it's actually caused a lot of conflict between us because her memories are wrong. That's how I view it. She clearly views my memories as wrong, but it's very hard to find common ground. And then this remarkable thing happened about 6 months ago where I found buried in a bunch of family papers, boxes and boxes of rubbish kind of thing, his attempt at writing an autobiography.
Oh.
And there were like 15 chapters that he wrote, and it was all typed out. And we go back to, typewriters and then hand scribbles, and he'd crossed paragraphs out and rewritten things. And it's not the father that I remember.
Hmm.
It's absolutely not. I mean, it's like it's a different person. I've got insights into this wishy character, this very strong moral code, somebody who actually felt quite sort of done wrong to in some of his business dealings. And I then look at that and I go, wow, not only is this not the person I remember, but I actually see a lot of me in what I'm reading in this person. And so it's just fascinating as a moment of, 42 plus years on, to get a new set of perspectives and to be able to reflect on what that means to me and who I am. So super, super interesting.
Super
And that's
powerful. I'm curious, Robert, if you don't mind sharing, did your sister have access or has she read this autobiography work?
Yes, I am. It was all, as I said, it was all typed. So I digitized it. So I've shared it with her and she's been reading it, and it does more accurately reflect memories,
Okay.
which I think, and I think there's reasons for that. He was bipolar, so he really struggled with depression. My mother and I tried to shelter her a lot from that. So I think she saw this joyous, more positive side of him. We saw this more depressive side of him, or I saw that more depressive side of him. So I think that's probably part of the difference. But for me, it's taken these blindfolds off, but it's really caused me to question the perception I have of other people at times.
Yeah.
And you just don't know what's going on. People say you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. It's
Right.
absolutely true. You don't know the true person.
Well, and it goes back to what you said. So often in life, it's an and, not an or, right? Like your memory was your truth. Your sister memory was her truth. And then you have this autobiographical data set, if you will,
Which is his
from
truth.
which was his truth. And how I appreciate you sharing that. What a powerful kind of illustration of when we're thinking or having perhaps hard conversations or just trying to solve that problem together. It's not just a power of curiosity, but an openness to being okay with the difference, and that the difference of your experience or mine is there's room for all of it in as full of an understanding as we could have of that situation, that context.
You're so right. And this is a very personal example, but if you transfer it into the workplace, it's so frequent that you see in a meeting conflict between two individuals who are really just not listening to each other and who have different perspectives of each other and who bring, by the way, all of these prejudices into the conversation based on all the other interactions they've had with each other
Mhm.
over the course of days, weeks, months, years, whatever it happens to be.
Absolutely. There's such power there in that assumption of best intention, too. At the end of the day, there are fewer humans out there who really are just trying to be menace, who are trying to do harm. Most commonly, you're going to find humans who have the best intention. Now, the impact or what they're doing may or may not fully align with that. But to your point, kind of pausing a moment, thinking that perhaps their perspective is different and influenced by a whole host of reasons as you're describing. And yet there's most likely then a solution there despite the difference. It's such a, I feel like in our society where it feels so, you highlighted, it felt much more positive, even if it was a false positivity. It's a helpful reminder, I think, in the climate that can be increasingly conflictual, divisive, to remember that. Yeah.
A really interesting point around um, sort of positive intent. It's easy to fall into not trusting and being wary. And I am certainly somebody who my natural position is to give trust, and then it's up to somebody to lose my trust. I'm not
Yeah.
of the you need to earn my trust. And I say over and over again to people, I don't know anybody who comes to work to say, I'm going to do a really, really shitty job today.
Right.
I just don't.
Wreak
Maybe
havoc
there's
on everyone else's
that's right.
life.
Maybe there is somebody somewhere who,
Right.
but I don't mean they're having a bad day and they're taking
Right.
that out on people, but they don't wake up and say, I'm going to go and really make this place miserable. That's not how human beings in general are. So I think if we all gave a little bit more grace, a little bit more trust, it would be very positive.
Absolutely. Would love to see that domino effect For
Think we
sure.
could be waiting a while for that one.
I always like wrapping these conversations. And first off, thank you. The power that comes from the realness of conversation. And you didn't have to share all of that on your personal journey. And yet it's certainly, I don't know if there's always the professional examples that leave such a powerful impact and make us think. So thank you for that. I do like leaving our audience with an immediate actionable takeaway, because as much as many of us may enjoy thinking about this, oftentimes really what we're talking about is, what are we going to do? What are we going to keep doing that seems to be helping us optimize our performance or lead a more fulfilling life? What's one thing we want to perhaps make a shift on, do a little differently for that same outcome? Is there something that you find particularly helpful in your day-to-day living that helps you? You mentioned the gratitude journaling, but is there anything else that helps you show up in the role as a leader, the role as a husband, the role as a father, and helps you sustain that over time?
I mentioned the gratitudes, and I try and do two personal and one business. And I don't know why I stick to three, but three just seems like the right number for me. And I get discombobulated if I write four for some reason, and I feel like I've underperformed if I only write two. So three seems to be the number.
The sweet spot.
There's a psychiatrist read.
You reflect a reflection of gratitude for two personal in your personal world, and then one in your professional roles or professional journey.
The other thing I think is really powerful are affirmations. So I have on my computer screen always a piece of paper with somewhere from 3 to 6 affirmations that I'll just glance at every now and again and think about. And I think they're really good for reinforcing messages that you want to keep in your head about yourself and dealing with anything that's a potential weakness or a potential area where you are conscious that you don't always contribute or turn up in the right way. So whether that's no buts, only ands, whether that's I'm good enough to speak up, I've got a voice that deserves to be heard, whatever it might happen to be, I think just having those pinned up on the side of your screen is a really good way of reminding yourself of the positives. So if you combine the affirmations in the morning and the gratitudes at night, I think it's a good combination.
It's a great combination. And it really all rolls up into it. This is about actions of reflection, right? Otherwise, it's just a passive exercise. It's an intellectual exercise. And I think whether it's the reflection, but driving towards, the internal behavior of how you're talking to yourself, about what you're about to do, the opportunity or the people around you, helpful cues to that behavior. Fantastic. Robert, a pleasure. Incredibly grateful for you sharing and look forward to more conversations. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.